The reporter's gambit. Ava Rostova had a nose for trouble, and an even sharper pen for exposing it. Corrupt politicians, exploitative corporations, human traffickers. She'd taken them all down, one meticulously researched, explosively written article at a time. Her name was whispered in hushed tones in boardrooms and back alleys alike. A badge of honor for the downtrodden, a curse for the powerful. Now, that nose had led her to Khalil Rahman, a warlord whose brutality was matched only by his ambition. Rahman ruled a swathe of land with an iron fist, his name synonymous with fear. Stories trickled out, whispers of massacres, forced conscription, systematic oppression. But no one dared to speak openly, let alone investigate. Ava, of course, found that irresistible. Her cover was simple, elegant, and, she hoped, convincing. A documentary filmmaker, interested in Rahman's unique approach to governance. The production company she claimed to represent was entirely fictional, a web of shell corporations she'd painstakingly constructed over weeks. The camera equipment in her battered Land Cruiser was real enough, though, and she'd spent hours studying documentaries about the region, absorbing the visual language and the rhythms of conversation. The approach to Rahman's compound was a masterclass in intimidation. Barbed wire fences snaked across the landscape, punctuated by guard towers manned by grim-faced men wielding assault rifles. The air thrummed with the distant roar of generators and the oppressive weight of unchallenged power. Ava swallowed, the metallic tang of fear coating her tongue, and forced a smile. This was it, time to play the part. The guards at the outer checkpoint were suspicious, their eyes lingering on her passport, her vehicle, her. They spoke little English, but their body language was universal, distrust etched into every line of their faces. After a tense hour of questioning, punctuated by radio calls and curt orders, they finally waved her through. The inner compound was a fortress. Buildings constructed of reinforced concrete rose from the dusty earth. Their windows narrow and heavily fortified. Armed men patrolled everywhere, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. It felt less like a seat of government and more like a prison. She was escorted to a surprisingly ornate reception room, furnished with plush carpets and overstuffed armchairs. A jarring contrast to the stark brutality outside. A woman waited for her, tall and elegant, with a gaze that could cut steel. This had to be Zara al-Din, Rahman's right hand, his confidant, and rumor had it, his lover. "Ms. Rostova," Zara said, her voice cool and precise. "We've been expecting you." Ava extended a hand, forcing a confident smile. "Zara al-Din. It's an honor. I'm eager to begin filming." Zara's eyes flicked over Ava's face, searching for any sign of deceit. "Mr. Rahman is a busy man. Your access will be limited." "I understand," Ava replied smoothly. "But I assure you, I'm very resourceful." Zara didn't return the smile. Resourcefulness can be a dangerous quality here. She led Ava down a long corridor, the silence broken only by the rhythmic thud of their footsteps. The walls were lined with portraits of Rahman, each one depicting him in a different pose of heroic grandeur. He was a master of self-promotion. Ava realized he needed to control the narrative, to sculpt his image in the eyes of the world. That was his weakness. They arrived at a large, imposing door. Zara paused, her hand resting on the handle. "Mr. Rahman values loyalty above all else. Disappoint him and you will regret it." She opened the door. Khalil Rahman was seated behind a massive desk, a map of the region spread out before him. He was smaller than Ava had expected, but his presence filled the room. His eyes, dark and intense, held a spark of manic energy. "Ms. Rostova," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Welcome to my humble abode." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit." Ava sat, placing her recorder on the desk. "Thank you for granting me this opportunity. Mr. Rahman, I'm eager to learn about your vision for the future." Rahman leaned back in his chair, studying her. "My vision is simple. Peace and prosperity for my people." "And how do you intend to achieve that?" Ava asked, keeping her voice neutral. By any means necessary, he replied, his eyes hardening that he gestured to the map. This land has been ravaged by conflict for too long that it needs a strong hand to guide it, to protect it from its enemies. And who are these enemies? Ramon smiled, a chillingly unsettling expression. Those who seek to undermine my authority. Those who spread lies and misinformation. He looked directly at Ava. Those who come here with hidden agendas. The air in the room crackled with tension. Ava met his gaze, refusing to flinch. My only agenda is to tell the truth, Mr. Ramon. The truth is a dangerous weapon, Ms. Rostova. Zara interjected, her voice sharp. It can be easily manipulated. I prefer to think of it as a light, Ava countered. It illuminates the darkness. Ramon chuckled. A light can also blind. Ms. Rostova, be careful where you shine it. He stood up, walking towards the window. I will allow you to film here to see what I am doing. But remember this, you are a guest in my house. You will abide by my rules, and you will not betray my trust. He turned back to her, his eyes like chips of obsidian. Do we understand each other? Ava nodded slowly. Perfectly. The interview continued for another hour, Ramon carefully crafting his narrative, presenting himself as a benevolent leader, a protector of his people. Ava listened, asked questions, and carefully observed. She saw the cracks in his facade, the hints of paranoia, the underlying cruelty. As she left the room, Zara stopped her. Mr. Ramon is a generous man, she said, her voice low. But he does not tolerate deception. I advise you to be truthful in your reporting. I always am, Ava replied, her voice unwavering. That Zara's eyes narrowed. We will be watching you, Ms. Rostova. Every step you take. Ava walked back to her Land Cruiser, the weight of their scrutiny pressing down on her. She knew she was walking a tightrope. One wrong step could send her plummeting into the abyss. But she was determined to expose Ramon, to bring his reign of terror to an end. She had a story to tell, and she wouldn't let anyone silence her. As she drove away from the compound, she glanced in her rearview mirror. The guard towers loomed in the distance, silent sentinels watching her every move. She was inside the lion's den now. The game had begun. The reporter's gambit was in motion, whispers of a dark network. Ava nursed the lukewarm tea, its minty aroma doing little to soothe the knot tightening in her stomach. Khalil Rahman's interview had been a performance, a carefully orchestrated display of benevolent leadership that reeked of lies. The film crew, hand-picked by Zara, were now packing up their equipment, their faces masks of polite indifference. Ava, however, remained rooted to her chair on the veranda, ostensibly reviewing her notes but in reality, searching for an opportunity. Enjoying the sunset, Ms. Rostova? Ramon's voice, smooth as polished steel, cut through the fading light. He stood framed in the doorway, a shadow lengthening behind him. Ava forced a smile. It's breathtaking. Thank you for allowing us access, Mr. Ramon. Access comes with responsibility, he said, his eyes glinting. I trust you understand the importance of portraying my efforts accurately. Of course, Ava replied, her gaze unwavering. Accuracy is paramount. He nodded slowly, a predator sizing up its prey. Zara will see you to your quarters. Rest well. Tomorrow we discuss the economic development projects. As Zara led her away, Ava felt Ramon's gaze boring into her back. She had to move quickly. Back in her sparsely furnished room, Ava wasted no time. While the others were occupied with dinner, she reactivated the miniature camera disguised as a button on her jacket. It had been a risky move, smuggling it past Zara's meticulous searches. But it was her only real advantage. The economic development meeting was her target. Zara had granted her access to Ramon's office under supervision to gather background information for the documentary. Ava intended to glean something far more substantial. The next morning, The air in Ramon's office was thick with the scent of sandalwood and unspoken threats. Zara sat across from Ava, a silent sentinel, her eyes constantly scanning. Ramon, behind his massive mahogany desk, gestured towards a stack of ledgers. "These documents detail the progress of our various initiatives," he said, his voice dripping with false pride. "Irrigation projects, schools, medical clinics, all funded by the generosity of our supporters." Ava picked up the top ledger. The entries were meticulously recorded, detailing expenditures and supposed donors. Too meticulous, she thought, too clean. She spent the next hour feigning interest, asking innocuous questions, while the button camera discreetly captured every page. Zara's vigilance was stifling. Ava knew she couldn't risk any overt action. Back in her room, the sun already dipping below the horizon, Ava transferred the data from the button camera to a secure drive hidden in the lining of her bag. The images were grainy, but legible, hours blurred as she meticulously reviewed the ledgers, cross-referencing names and figures. Then, she found a series of transactions, disguised as payments to a construction company, led to a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. A quick search revealed its true beneficiary, Al-Nusra Front, a known terrorist organization. A chill ran down Ava's spine. Ramon wasn't just a warlord, he was a financier of global terror. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about exposing corruption in a remote corner of the world. It was about preventing attacks on innocent lives, potentially on a global scale. The magnitude of the discovery threatened to overwhelm her. She felt a surge of fear, cold and sharp if Ramon knew what she had uncovered. She forced herself to focus. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. She needed to get this information out. But how? Every move was monitored, every conversation overheard. Later that evening, as she walked the perimeter of the compound with Zara, Ava decided to test the waters. "The economic development projects seem ambitious," she said casually, her voice carefully neutral. Zara's gaze sharpened. "Mr. Ramon is a visionary. He understands the needs of his people. And he has the resources to meet those needs." Ava pressed gently. "That requires significant financial backing." Zara stopped walking, turning to face Ava. "Some things are best left unsaid, Ms. Rostova. Curiosity can be dangerous." Her voice was low, laced with a chilling undertone. Ava met her gaze, refusing to flinch. "I'm just trying to understand the full picture." "The full picture?" Zara repeated, a hint of mockery in her voice. "Is often more complex than it appears. Be careful what you choose to see." She turned and continued walking, leaving Ava to grapple with the weight of her discovery and the chilling reality of her situation. She was no longer just investigating a warlord. She was standing on the precipice of a global conspiracy, and one wrong step could send her tumbling into the abyss. The warlord's suspicion. The afternoon sun, a molten gold, stretched shadows across the courtyard as Ava tweaked the focus on her lens. Before her, a staged scene of childhood joy. Children shrieked with laughter in a game of tag, their voices amplified by the courtyard's stone embrace. A performance, meticulously arranged for her benefit. Beside her, Khalil Rahman materialized, his presence a quiet imposition. His gaze lingered on the children, a courteous smile playing on his lips, one that lacked genuine warmth. "They are the future's promise," he stated, his tone even, almost melodic. "Wouldn't you agree, Ms. Rostova? Worth shielding, worth defending fiercely." Ava maintained her camera's steady gaze, composing a shot that framed him against the manufactured serenity. "Every child deserves sanctuary," she offered, her voice measured. "And what future are you building for them, Mr. Rahman?" A low chuckle rumbled in his chest. "One unshackled from Western constraints. One where they can flourish according to their ancestral beliefs, their heritage." He paused, his focus shifting from the boisterous youngsters to Ava, a sharp, appraising glint in his dark eyes. "And what is your vision, Ms. Rostova. For this land, for the world at large. The question hung, heavy with unspoken implications. A challenge thrown down like a gauntlet. Ava met his intense stare, refusing to yield. A future forged in honest revelation and mutual understanding. She asserted, her tone unwavering. That is what I strive to capture with my work. Truth is ephemeral, Ramon countered, his voice softening, becoming almost conversational, easily distorted, readily molded. And comprehension. It demands a willingness to penetrate the veneer. He gestured towards the playing children. Do you truly perceive what unfolds here, Ms. Rostova? Or do you merely see what aligns with your preconceptions? Ava summoned a smile. I am trying to grasp the totality, Mr. Ramon. Hence, the abundance of questions. He dipped his head in acknowledgement. And I am pleased to provide answers. Within reasonable bounds, naturally. He pivoted, heading towards the imposing edifice. Dinner will be served presently. I trust your accommodations are proving adequate. More than adequate, Ava responded, a touch too eagerly. Thank you. As Ramon vanished into the building's depths, Ava slowly lowered her camera. The weight of his scrutiny settled like a physical burden. Suspicion emanated from him like a palpable aura. A quick scan of the courtyard revealed Zara Aldin stationed near the archway. Her eyes boring into a Vienno kindness resided in Zara's expression, just an icy, calculating assessment. Ava feigned absorption in her equipment, carefully disassembling the camera, nesting it securely within its case. Greater caution was required, a more subtle approach. Ramon was no simpleton. He had thrived in this precarious existence by virtue of his ruthlessness and keen perception. Later, as the sun bled crimson and violet across the horizon, Ava found herself sequestered in the library, ostensibly immersed in historical documents relevant to her film. The chamber was immense and eerily silent. Redolent with the scent of aged paper and leather-bound volumes, she pretended to scrutinize a time-worn manuscript, but her thoughts raced elsewhere. She sensed Zara's presence before perceiving her directly. A subtle disturbance in the air. The whisper of fabric against fabric. Ava didn't raise her head, but she knew Zara loomed nearby, observing. Mr. Ramon is concerned, Zara stated, her voice toneless and devoid of inflection. Ava deliberately closed the heavy manuscript. Concerned about what, precisely? About your inquiries. About your fascination with certain sectors within the compound's perimeter. Ava turned to confront her, meeting her frigid gaze head-on. I am a filmmaker, Zara. Inquisitiveness is part of the trade. Inquisitiveness can prove a perilous trait, Zara countered, her eyes narrowing imperceptibly, particularly when it veers down treacherous paths. And what path would that be? Ava challenged, her voice laced with defiance. Zara evaded a direct response. Mr. Ramon is a man of considerable generosity. He has achieved much for this community's betterment. He will not countenance anyone seeking to undermine his accomplishments. I have no intention of undermining anyone or anything, Ava stated, her voice gaining volume. I am merely attempting to recount a story. Then recount the narrative he wishes you to recount, Zara advised, her voice hardening. It would be imprudent to pursue any other course. Zara pivoted and glided away, leaving Ava isolated in the hushed library. The oppressive weight of the veiled threat settled upon her. She was no longer merely documenting a story. She had become entangled in a perilous game of cat and mouse. A quick glance towards the window revealed Zara melting into the shadows. She was under surveillance, of that she was certain. Every action, every query, was being dissected and assessed. She had to outwit them, outmaneuver them, exercise extreme vigilance. Her survival, perhaps the survival of countless others, depended on it. She opened the manuscript once more, but the archaic script swam before her eyes. The warlord's distrust had plunged everything into a deep, unsettling gloom. caught in the web. The satellite phone's hum vibrated against Ava, muffled by the loose fabric of her jalaba as she pressed it close. Moonlight knifed into the room through a chink in the curtains, illuminating swirling dust. Evening prayers had given way to a silence so profound it hummed with menace. She'd gambled on this being the quietest hour, hoping Rahman's gaze might momentarily falter. Eye in her palm, the memory card felt weighty, a testament to the stolen glimpses it contained. Masked interviews with frightened villagers, Rahman's purported charities revealed as brutal labor fronts. Inhaling deeply, she flipped open the phone and punched in Ben's number. The satellite signal wavered, a fragile lifeline threatened by the digital ether. Last, it solidified. Ben, it's Ava. Can you hear me? Her voice scratched against the quiet. Static hissed, then a garbled version of Ben's voice. Ava? Damned signal. What have you got? Sending the files now. Evidence. The camps, the exploitation. Rahman is a fraud. She initiated the upload, watching the progress bar inch forward like a hesitant soldier. Each increment felt like a reckless bet against Rahman's pervasive influence. A sheen of perspiration slicked her brow. Abruptly, a jarring screech of feedback ripped through the connection, severing Ben's reply. The screen died. Her pulse hammered against her ribs, footfalls thudded closer outside. A flurry of movement followed as she tore the phone apart, grinding the SIM card beneath her heel. The memory card, her last card to play, disappeared into the folds of her robe. The door exploded inward, with splintering like shattered bone. Zara stood silhouetted. Her expression an unreadable mask. Two guards flanked her, Kalashnikovs raised. Ava Rostova, Zara announced, her tone stripped of its prior cordiality. The game concludes. Ava stood firm, attempting to project an innocence she was far from feeling. I don't understand. A sneer twisted Zara's lips. Spare me the pretense. The signal was traced. You communicated with the outside, betraying our community. The guards seized her, their grip vice-like. Resistance was pointless. She was marched across the compound, past the villagers' eyes, now pools of reflected fear. Rahman awaited in his study. The air thick with the scent of rich leather and unchecked power. He sat behind an imposing desk, his features creased with disappointment, not fury. Ava, he murmured, his voice almost a caress. I held you in higher regard, that I welcomed you, shared my vision. Your vision is built on deceit, Ava countered, her voice trembling slightly. You're oppressing these people, stifling truth, crafting a falsehood for the world to swallow. Rahman sighed, the sound of weary resignation. You wound me, I am merely guiding my flock, shielding them from the encroaching storm. You, however, have become a disruptive element. He nodded towards Zara, who presented a gleaming tray. Upon it lay the shattered remains of the satellite phone, the mangled SIM, and a crisp printout of Ava's passport, her true identity starkly revealed. We know who you are, Ava Rostova. Your connections, your motives. Rahman's voice became steel, and we possess the means to address those who threaten our way of life. The interrogation was a grim ballet of coercion, blending physical discomfort with calculated psychological pressure. Zara, unexpectedly, proved the more relentless inquisitor. For hours, she pressed Ava, desperate to unearth her contacts. The information disseminated, the source of her support. Rahman watched, an impassive spectator in his private tribunal. Ava refused to yield, clinging to the hope that her smuggled footage had escaped. She endured the slaps, the accusations, the veiled threats, fueled by the possibility that truth might prevail. As dawn painted the sky with tentative strokes of light, they dragged her to a cramped, lightless cell deep within the compound. The air hung heavy with mildew and the ghosts of past despair. A crude stool and a tattered blanket comprised the meager furnishings. The iron door echoed as it slammed shut, engulfing her in suffocating darkness. Ava leaned against the clammy stone, the taste of blood coating her tongue. Her body throbbed, her spirit. Bruised, but she still breathed. She shut her eyes, the faces of the villagers flickering in her mind's eye. She had failed them, exposing herself and potentially worsening their plight. Yet, within the abyss of despair, a spark of defiance refused to be extinguished. Imprisoned, yes, but not defeated somehow. She would reclaim her agency. The call for a legend. The satellite phone buzzed on the edge of Mac's desk, a jarring intrusion in the pre-dawn gloom of the Situation Room. He picked it up, the cool metal a familiar weight against his palm. Riley, a voice, tight with urgency, crackled through the speaker. Mac, it's Control. We have a problem. Rostova's been compromised, captured. Mac's jaw tightened as he swiveled in his chair, the worn leather creaking in protest. Compromised. The word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Ava Rostova wasn't just any asset. She was a damn good journalist with a steel spine and a knack for getting too close to the fire. Details. The voice on the other end relayed the fragmented information they had. A severed transmission, Zara's name. Rahman Khalil. Mac already knew enough. Khalil's compound was a fortress, nestled deep in the unforgiving terrain. A labyrinth of armed guards, surveillance, and unwavering loyalty fueled by fear and profit. Intel suggests she was attempting to transmit evidence. Data on Khalil's operations, his links, the whole damn house of cards. Mac rubbed a hand across his stubbled chin. Has anything gotten out? Negative. We believe Khalil has total control of the situation on the ground and no leaks. No compromises, aside from Ava. The voice paused, a palpable sense of frustration bleeding through the static. We're working on extraction strategies. But, Mac, it's Khalil that he won't hesitate. Mac knew. Khalil was a butcher, a man who made an art form out of cruelty. He wouldn't see Ava as a journalist. He'd see her as a threat, a loose end to be silenced with extreme prejudice. I need options, Mac said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Inside, a knot of cold resolve was tightening. We're running simulations, assessing possible entry points, calculating troop deployment, standard protocol. Standard protocol won't cut it, Mac interrupted. Khalil's compound is a black hole. Throwing manpower at it is a recipe for disaster. We need finesse, something unconventional. Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Max stared at the topographical map of the region projected onto the wall, his mind already racing, discarding strategies as quickly as they formed. He needed someone who could move like a ghost, hit like a hurricane, and disappear without a trace. Someone legendary. He reached for another phone. A secure line. Its number etched into his memory. He punched in the sequence, each digit a hammer blow against the silence. The phone rang twice before a calm, familiar voice answered. Norris. Chuck, it's Mac Riley. A beat of silence. Riley. Haven't heard from you in a while. What's cooking? Mac cut to the chase. We have a situation in Khalil territory. An American journalist, Ava Rostova, has been captured. She was working undercover, gathering evidence on Khalil's operation. He could almost feel the weight of Norris's attention on the other end of the line. Khalil, huh? Heard whispers. Nasty piece of work. Nasty is an understatement. We believe she's holding critical information that could expose Khalil's entire network. But if he breaks her... Mac let the sentence hang, unfinished. The implication was clear. And you need her out. It wasn't a question. We need her out, and we need her out now. Standard extraction methods are problematic. Khalil's compound is heavily fortified. Crawling with armed guards. A direct assault would be a bloodbath. Another pause. Mac could almost see Norris, his eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. Calculating the odds, he knew what he was asking. He was asking a man to walk into hell. What's the intel on the ground? Norris finally asked. Mac relayed the information he had: the layout of the compound, the estimated number of guards, the known surveillance points. He painted a grim picture. a landscape of concrete walls, razor wire, and unwavering hostility. When he was finished, Norris was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low and resolute. "Give me the coordinates, I'll make a call." "Chuck, this is a lot to ask." Mac rarely expressed gratitude, but the words felt inadequate, a feeble attempt to acknowledge the magnitude of Norris's willingness. "Some things," Norris said, his voice hardening, "are worth fighting for, especially when someone's standing up against evil." Mac felt a flicker of something akin to relief, a fragile warmth in the face of overwhelming odds. "I'll send you everything we have. Satellite imagery, personnel files, tactical schematics. You'll have it all within the hour." "Good." Norris's voice was clipped, efficient. "And Riley?" "Yeah. Tell me about this journalist, Rostova." Mac hesitated. He didn't know Ava Rostova personally, but he knew her reputation, he knew her dedication, her courage, her unwavering commitment to the truth. "She's resilient, damn resilient. She won't break easily." "Then we need to get to her before they try." The line went dead. Max stared at the phone in his hand, the silence amplifying the pounding of his heart. He had just placed a call for a legend. Now, all he could do was wait and pray. Ghost in the machine. Heat devils spiraled across the baking terrain as Chuck Norris, perched on a hidden bluff, scanned Khalil's compound. Waves of heat blurred the already desolate vista. Barbed wire, like metallic vipers, coiled around the walls, punctuated by heavily armed watchtowers. Less a military base, more a prison designed to contain, not repel. Perfect, he thrived under pressure. His mission. Not conquest, but extraction. A delicate, silent operation. Lethal when necessary. Mac's frantic message hammered in his thoughts. "Get Ava out. Chuck. At any cost." Mac's judgment was ironclad. Ava Rostova, though a stranger, earned his respect. Anyone who challenged Khalil deserved a lifeline. Night became his cloak. He waited, letting the shadows deepen, until they consumed the harsh landscape. The moon, a thin blade of silver, offered just enough illumination. He moved with ageless fluidity, a phantom in the currents of air. His initial objective: circumvent the outer defenses, a treacherous web of sensors and landmines. He didn't disable them, he danced around them. Years of honing his instincts allowed him to perceive the slightest variations in the earth, the near-silent thrum of electronic sentinels. His feet barely disturbed the dust, his movements echoing the precision of a master craftsman. He flowed through the security net like smoke. The guards, callow, listless, inadequately trained, they lounged against the walls, smoking and gossiping, their weapons forgotten. They never saw him coming, becoming ghosts themselves. Point one coughed, a surprised sound, swallowed by the night, and slumped soundlessly. A pressure point, expertly applied. The other, stirred by the muffled noise, barely managed to turn before Chuck silenced him. A lightning-fast strike to the windpipe brought oblivion and no commotion. No struggle, only the whisper of falling bodies inside. The reek of diesel fumes and unwashed bodies hung heavy in the air. The compound's layout resembled a twisted labyrinth of corridors and courtyards, illuminated by sputtering gas lamps. Chuck became one with the shadows, every sense amplified, absorbing the nuances of his environment. The position of cameras, the patterns of patrol, the number of sentries, the heartbeat of the compound. He needed intel, and he needed it now. He found it in the comm room, a cramped, cluttered space filled with antiquated equipment. A lone technician hunched over a console, his fingers flying across the glowing screen. Chuck materialized, a shadow peeling away from the darkness. The technician, jolted, swiveled around. He started to shout, but Chuck was quicker. A swift blow to the base of the skull, and the man crumpled, unconscious. He breached the security logs, sifting through the entries. Ava Rostova, Cell Block C, Level 2. Interrogation chamber. The details were scarce, but sufficient. He knew her location, and the interrogation hinted at a rapidly closing window. He also downloaded a schematic, a rough but invaluable map of the intricate hallways. He imprinted the layout onto his mind, registering the location of the armory, the checkpoints, the potential escape routes. Knowledge equaled leverage, and in this den of inequity, leverage was the only currency that counted. As he prepared to leave, a voice barked over the intercom. Security sweep, Sector 4. Report status. Chuck eyed the prone technician. No report forthcoming. He seized the microphone. Sector 4, situation nominal. He announced, his voice an uncanny mimicry of the technician's. Just resolving a minor equipment failure. Roger that. The voice affirmed. Carry on. He replaced the microphone, a steely smile curving his lips. He was a phantom in the system, a glitch in Khalil's meticulously structured domain, and he was about to unravel it. Leaving the communications room, he dissolved back into the shadows, his focus sharpening. Cell Block C, Level 2. His movements gained renewed urgency. Each step precise and focused. He could feel the tension escalating, the air vibrating with anticipation. He was nearing his goal. He slipped past another checkpoint, neutering the cameras with a precisely deployed MP grenade. A silent burst of energy that crippled the electronics. The guards, caught unaware, were neutralized with swift efficiency. He left no echo of his presence. The interrogation room, he could almost taste Ava's essence, her pain, her fortitude. He understood he was walking into a trap, but the calculus was simple. He would not abandon her. He was Chuck Norris, and he always saw things through. The door to Cell Block C, a steel sentinel, stood. Between him and his objective. He paused, inhaled deeply, and prepared to breach. The era of stealth had passed. Now it was time to unleash the storm on Khalil. Desperate measures. The stale air of the cell clung to Ava like a shroud. Execution. The word echoed in the silence. A hammer blow against her resolve. That Zara's parting words, dripping with honeyed menace, left no room for doubt. This wasn't a game of cat and mouse anymore. This was the end. But the end, Ava decided, wasn't going to be quiet. She surveyed her prison. A concrete box, barely bigger than a coffin, illuminated by a single, flickering bulb encased in wire mesh. The walls were scarred with the desperate marks of previous occupants' scratches, faded bloodstains, and prayers etched in broken Arabic. The iron door, heavy and unforgiving, was the only way in or out. Hope, she knew, was a dangerous luxury. Action was her only currency. The mattress, a thin, straw-filled sack, offered little comfort, but it did offer something. Working quickly, her fingers numb with cold, Ava began to unravel the seams. The coarse straw scratched her skin, raising angry welts. Dust motes danced in the weak light, catching in her throat, making her cough. She had to be quiet. For what felt like an eternity, she worked, pulling, twisting, separating the straw from its casing. Soon, a sizable pile accumulated in the center of the cell. Ava glanced at the small, barred window high in the wall. Useless for escape, but useful for something else. Taking a deep breath, she piled the straw against the wall directly beneath the window. Then, with a sharp, jagged piece of metal she'd managed to pry loose from the bed frame, she began to strike the wall, aiming for the dry straw. Sparks flew. Nothing again, and again her arm ached. Her knuckles were raw, but she persisted. The smell of damp concrete filled her nostrils, mingled with the earthy scent of the straw. Finally, a tiny flicker. A wisp of smoke. Ava blew gently, coaxing the ember to life. The straw caught, slowly at first, then with increasing ferocity. Flames licked at the wall, casting dancing shadows that distorted the cell into a grotesque mockery of reality. Thick, acrid. Smoke billowed upwards, filling her lungs. Ava coughed, her eyes watering. She knew she had only minutes. The heat was already becoming unbearable. She grabbed the tattered remains of the mattress cover and used it to fan the flames, feeding the small fire into a raging inferno. The fire alarm shrieked, a deafening, high-pitched wail that reverberated through the concrete corridors. Ava braced herself against the wall, coughing, her lungs burning, but a grim satisfaction bloomed in her chest. Chaos. That's what she needed, a distraction. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Shouting erupted, panicked orders barked in Arabic, punctuated by the clang of metal on metal. Ava pressed her ear against the door, trying to make sense of the commotion. Cell block C, level 2, fire in cell. Rostova. Her name? They knew? Good. The lock clicked open. The door swung inward, revealing 2 guards clad in black tactical gear, their faces masked, their eyes wide with alarm. They hesitated, momentarily stunned by the wall of smoke and flames that engulfed the cell. Ava didn't give them time to react. She lunged forward, throwing the burning mattress cover at them. They recoiled, swatting at the flames. Ava used the opportunity to slip past them, into the smoke-filled corridor. The hallway was a scene of pandemonium. Guards were running in every direction, shouting, their weapons drawn. Sprinklers overhead had activated, drenching everything in a cold, stinging spray. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning straw. Ava kept low, using the confusion to her advantage. She knew she couldn't escape the compound alone. This was a desperate gamble, a bid for survival, a signal to anyone who might be listening. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the swirling smoke. Zara. Her face was a mask of fury. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw clenched. She moved with a predatory grace, her hand resting on the holstered pistol at her hip. Rostova. Zara's voice cut through the noise, sharp and dangerous. You will regret this. Ava didn't stop. She turned and ran, deeper into the chaos, hoping, praying, that someone, somewhere, had heard her cry for help. Zara watched Ava disappear into the smoke. A muscle twitched in her jaw. The fire was a nuisance, a disruption. But it was Rostova's defiance that truly enraged her. She barked orders at the surrounding guards. Extinguish the fire. Seal off level 2. Find Rostova. I want her alive, for now. Her gaze swept over the chaotic scene, a cold calculation in her eyes. The American journalist was resourceful, more so than she'd anticipated. But resourcefulness wouldn't save her. Zara would make sure of that. She tightened her grip on her pistol. This little game had gone on long enough that it was time to end it. The fist of justice. The acrid smoke stung Ava's eyes as she coughed, hacking up phlegm. The fire she'd started was working, filling the corridor outside her cell with a dense, choking haze. But it was also attracting attention through the bars. She could hear shouting. The heavy thud of boots getting closer. Zara would be leading them. Her voice a viper's hiss above the din. Ava pressed her ear to the cold stone wall, trying to discern the direction of the approaching guards. Khalil's interrogation had left her bruised and battered, her mind reeling. She needed a miracle. And then, a different sound cut through the chaos. A rhythmic thumping, like a distant drumbeat steadily growing louder. It wasn't the disorganized scramble of prison guards, but something deliberate, purposeful. Outside the cell block, Chuck Norris moved like a phantom through the swirling smoke. Mac Riley had provided the intel. Cell block C, level 2. But navigating the labyrinthine prison was proving more difficult than anticipated. He'd bypassed the main entrance, rappelling down the outer wall and slipping through a rarely used maintenance tunnel. Now, he was close. Rounding a corner, he saw them point 4 of Khalil's elite guards, clad in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by balaclavas. They were fanning out, weapons raised, clearly searching for the source of the fire. The leader barked orders in Pashto, his voice sharp and authoritative. They hadn't seen him yet. Chuck Norris didn't hesitate. This wasn't a stealth mission. Any more that he was the fist of justice, and it was time to deliver. He exploded from the shadows, a whirlwind of controlled fury. The first guard barely had time to react before Chuck's fist connected with his jaw. The force of the blow lifting him off his feet, he crashed to the ground, unconscious before he landed. The other 3 guards whirled around. Their eyes widening in surprise, they raised their weapons, But Chuck was already moving. He weaved between them, a blur of motion too fast for the eye. To follow. A spinning back kick sent one guard staggering into the wall, his rifle clattering to the floor. The second guard managed to fire a burst, the bullets whistling past Chuck's ear. He responded with a lightning-fast series of punches and kicks, each blow precisely targeted, each movement imbued with decades of martial arts mastery. A palm strike to the sternum winded the guard, followed by a knee to the groin that sent him crumpling to the floor, gasping for air. The third guard, bigger and more experienced than the others, lunged forward. Attempting to grapple, Chuck sidestepped the attack with ease. Using the guard's momentum against him, he grabbed the man's arm, executing a swift and brutal armbar that elicited a scream of agony. The guard thrashed wildly, but Chuck maintained his grip, applying relentless pressure until he heard the sickening snap of bone. The remaining guards were down. Incapacitated, Chuck Norris straightened, his gaze sweeping the corridor. He felt no remorse, no satisfaction, only grim determination. He had a mission to complete. He reached cell block C, the fire burning brighter now, the smoke thicker. He spotted Ava's cell, the bars blackened by soot. He could see her silhouette inside, huddled against the wall. "Ava Rostova?" he called out, his voice calm and steady amidst the chaos. Ava peered through the bars, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Chuck Norris?" she croaked, her voice hoarse from the smoke. "Stand back," he said, his voice brooking no argument. He didn't bother with keys or lockpicks. He simply gripped the bars of the cell door, his muscles tensing. With a guttural roar, he pulled. The steel bars groaned, bending and twisting under his immense strength. With a final, ear-splitting screech, they snapped, creating a gaping hole in the cell door. Ava stumbled out, coughing and weak. Chuck caught her, supporting her weight. "We have to go," he said, his eyes scanning the corridor. "Zara will be here soon." He slung Ava's arm over his shoulder, helping her to walk. They moved quickly, heading back the way he came, the smoke swirling around them, the sounds of the prison guards drawing closer. Escape from the compound. "Let's move," Chuck Norris rumbled, the sound of physical presence against Ava's sternum. He didn't wait, becoming a wraith as he melted into the corridor, silencing 2 sentries before they could react. Heart hammering against her ribs, Ava followed, scooping up a discarded AK-47. The weapon felt foreign, yet a primal awareness sharpened her senses. Almost immediately, they slammed into opposition. A fire team of Khalil's thugs, roused by the uproar, charged around a bend. Spitting lead Norris became a whirlwind, bullets veering away as he closed the gap with frightening speed. He neutralized them with economical violence. A blur of limbs and close-quarters combat. Ava, steadying herself, unleashed staccato bursts, suppressing the remaining hostiles long enough for Chuck to finish mopping up. She blinked against the acrid tang of gunpowder after each volley. "Acceptable." Norris grunted, his face an impassive mask. "But conserve ammunition." The comm center awaits. The compound was a suffocating maze of concrete and iron, heavy with the cloying odors of stale sweat and mounting dread. Khalil's enforcers swarmed from every portal, their faces masks of surprise and simmering rage. Ava fought with desperate fervor, using her intimate knowledge of the building's architecture to predict their advances, steering Norris through the labyrinthine halls. He was a human battering ram, an unstoppable force, yet one man could only be in one place at a time. At T1 juncture, pinned behind a toppled table, they endured a storm of lead. Peeking over the edge, Ava identified a heavy machine gun emplacement dominating the passage. "Dead end that way," she yelled above the din without hesitation. Norris grabbed a fire extinguisher and sprinted towards the nest, releasing a blinding cloud of white foam. Seizing the opening, Ava circled around the flank, felling the disoriented crew with precise shots. The abrupt silence rang in their ears. "Not bad," Norris conceded, a flicker of something akin to approval in his gaze. "But time bleeds away." They continued, leaving a swathe of unconscious bodies in their wake. Ava's hands burned. Her hearing buzzed, but she refused to yield. The promise of exposing Khalil's atrocities, of finally bringing the truth to light, fueled each step. Finally, they breached the communication center. The room pulsed with blinking lights and the resonant hum of servers. The air thick with electrical static. Point two technicians, faces drained of color, were hunched over their stations. Norris swiftly dealt with them, leaving Ava to her vital task. She flew to a terminal, her fingers dancing across the keys. She initiated the upload of the encrypted footage, the crucial evidence she had risked everything to secure, to a protected cloud repository. The progress bar inched forward with agonizing slowness, each increment of victory against Khalil's looming shadow. Almost there, she breathed, her vision locked on the screen. Suddenly, the door splintered inward, and Zara charged into the room, flanked by a cohort of heavily armed guards. Her eyes burned with animosity. "You!" she spat, leveling a trembling finger at Ava. "You'll regret this betrayal." Norris moved to intercept, shielding Ava from Zara's venomous gaze. "Too late," he stated, his tone a low, dangerous calm. Ignoring him, Zara's focus remained riveted on Ava. "Kill them!" she shrieked. The guards unleashed a hail of fire, but Norris moved like liquid mercury, deflecting rounds with impossible reflexes, closing the distance with unnerving speed. Ava dove behind a console. Snagging a dropped sidearm, she returned fire, targeting the guards' lower limbs, hindering their advance. The upload reached completion. "It's done," Ava cried, a wave of relief washing over her. A strangled roar emanated from the doorway. Khalil, his features twisted with unadulterated rage, shoved past Zara and her remaining protectors. "You think you've prevailed?" he bellowed, his voice trembling with fury. "This isn't finished, Rostova. I will pursue you to the ends of the earth." Norris cast a sidelong glance at Ava. Time to depart. They battled their way out of the comm center, leaving Khalil and his enraged forces behind. The compound had descended into bedlam, alarms shrieking, the air saturated with the scent of smoke and discharged firearms. They slipped through the chaos, silent and swift, melting into the shadows. Later, in his command hub, Khalil replayed the security recording of Ava and Norris's escape. His face was a rigid mask of fury. "Find them!" he roared, slamming his fist against the console. "I want them extinguished, and uncover what she transmitted. Purge it. Annihilate it. I demand every vestige of it erased." He paused, his gaze sharpening with cold determination. "And Zara, you failed me. Abysmally." The atmosphere thickened with unspoken repercussions as Zara visibly recoiled, comprehending her diminished standing within the organization. Khalil turned back to the monitor, his gaze fixed on Ava's captured image. "This is war," he breathed, his voice infused with venom. "And I will be victorious. Justice prevails." "You thought you could outsmart me, little bird?" Khalil's voice dripped with venom. He stood before Ava's cell, the flickering torchlight dancing across the cold stone walls of cell block C. Level 2. The air hung thick with the stench of mildew and despair. Ava, bruised and weary from hours of interrogation, met his gaze unflinchingly. "The truth always finds its way out, Khalil," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "You can't bury it forever." Khalil chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Truth is a malleable thing. Rostova. A story told by the victor. And I am, undeniably, the victor here." He gestured to the armed guards flanking him. "Or so I was, until your geriatric friend decided to crash the party." He spat on the floor. "Where is he?" Ava remained silent, a flicker of hope igniting within her despite the grim circumstances. She knew Chuck wouldn't abandon her. He never did. Meanwhile, deep within the bowels of the compound, Chuck Norris moved like a phantom, He'd slipped away from Zara and her henchmen after Ava's escape, using the ensuing chaos as cover. Every shadow was his ally, every creak and groan of the aging structure a warning system. He was hunting Khalil. And he was close. He found him quickly, just a short walk down the hall. Khalil, distracted by his conversation with Ava, didn't hear Chuck's approach until it was too late. A hand clamped down on his shoulder, the grip like iron. Khalil whirled around, his eyes widening in disbelief. "You! Looks like your party's over." "Khalil," Chuck said, his voice a low growl. The guards reacted instantly, raising their weapons. But Chuck was faster. A swift kick disarmed one, sending his rifle clattering across the stone floor. A spinning back fist incapacitated another. The remaining guards hesitated, fear flickering in their eyes. They'd heard the stories, the legends. Facing Chuck Norris was a death sentence. "Enough!" Khalil roared, shoving past his stunned guards. "I'll deal with him myself." He lunged at Chuck, a crude knife flashing in his hand. Chuck easily deflected the clumsy attack. His movements fluid and precise, he disarmed Khalil with a swift twist, the knife clattering to the ground. "You think you can take me?" Khalil snarled, his face contorted with rage. "This is my territory. My kingdom. Your kingdom is built on lies and suffering," Chuck replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "And kingdoms like that never last." The fight began in earnest. Khalil, fueled by desperation and rage, fought with a ferocity born of fear. But against Chuck Norris, he was hopelessly outmatched. Chuck's movements were a blur of motion, each strike precise and devastating. He dodged Khalil's wild swings with ease, countering with lightning-fast punches and kicks. Khalil stumbled, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He tried to regain his footing, but Chuck was relentless. A final, perfectly timed roundhouse kick sent Khalil crashing into the stone wall. Knocking the wind out of him, he slid to the ground, dazed and defeated. The guards, realizing the futility of their situation, lowered their weapons. The fight was over. "It's over, Khalil," Chuck said, his voice echoing through the silent corridor. "Your reign of terror ends here." News of Khalil's defeat spread like wildfire through the compound. The remaining loyalists, seeing their leader vanquished, quickly surrendered. Chuck secured the compound, freeing the prisoners and dismantling Khalil's operation. He moved swiftly and methodically, gathering evidence of Khalil's crimes. Documents, weapons, and communication logs. Meanwhile, Ava, upon hearing of Khalil's downfall, felt a surge of adrenaline. She knew what she had to do. Using a hidden satellite phone she had managed to hold on to, she contacted her editor, relaying the location of the digital evidence she had uploaded earlier. She gave them the go-ahead to publish her exposé within hours. The world exploded. Ava Rostova's article, accompanied by irrefutable evidence, detailed Khalil Rahman's crimes in excruciating detail. The world watched in horror as his network of corruption, terrorism, and smuggling was laid bare. Governments scrambled to launch investigations. International sanctions were imposed, and Khalil's empire began to crumble. The footage Ava and Chuck had uploaded, coupled with Ava's meticulous reporting, ignited a firestorm of global outrage. Khalil's collaborators, fearing prosecution, turned on each other, providing further evidence to investigators. The region, long held captive by Khalil's tyranny, erupted in celebration. People poured into the streets, waving flags and chanting slogans of freedom. The oppressive silence that had once gripped their lives was replaced by a cacophony of joy and hope. The symbol of Khalil was torn down. Days later, as the dust settled, Ava stood beside Chuck, watching the sunrise over the liberated territory. The air was clean, the sky clear, and the future, for the first time in a long time, felt bright. "It's over," she said, a smile playing on her lips. Justice prevailed. Chuck nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It always does. It always does." The fight had been long and arduous, but the truth had triumphed. Ava Rostova, the fearless journalist, had exposed the darkness and brought light to a world in desperate need of it, and Chuck Norris, the silent guardian, had ensured that justice was served. The region began to rebuild, to heal, and to embrace a new era of hope, forever grateful to the woman who dared to speak truth to power and the man who ensured she lived to tell the tale.